Welcome back to the Piping Pastor. Today I thought we'd do a nod to Memorial Day by looking at the poetry of Wilfred Owen. Well, this afternoon we have the back porch edition of the Piping Pastor, and fear not, I have no intention of trying to take over that 2 a.m. time slot. But the weather is beautiful, so out comes the Panama hat and the more casual summer attire. And as you may see from this angle, my tattoo is showing. And I thought I should make mention of that because that created quite a bit of a conversation in a previous video, one of my very old videos from when I first started doing them out here. So if you have any questions about the theological significance of having a tattoo or something, then by all means check that video out and the conversation that ensued. I don't think that person and I ended up agreeing. In point of fact, I think they unsubscribed. But you know, that's their prerogative. Today, I'm enjoying some Revelation match in my Whitluck ebony pipe. And just a personal note for Mad Piper, as I sip my cold brew coffee, considering that you came around on the Three Nuns tobacco and ended up liking that, if you haven't had a chance to check out the Revelation match by Sutliff, I would suggest you give it a go. I normally don't go for toppings on my tobaccos. Casings I'm okay with because I think they bring out the natural flavors, but I'm not a toppings person. I don't really care for aromatics. But the citrus topping on this is rather appealing. And it also has that historical connection, much like Three Nuns does, because this was Einstein's tobacco. So there's a bit of both there. Well, I haven't done a poetry in the Bible video for a wee bit. And I thought, being it is Memorial Day weekend, that Wilfred Owen would be a good one to look at. Now, Wilfred Owen, for those of you who are unaware, was one of the probably most important, by my view anyway, poets of World War I. When there were several, you know, and very prolific authors and authors that did really, really well. But from my perspective, I think that his poetic descriptions of battlefields and battlefield trauma is second to none. Now, sadly, Wilfred Owen did not survive World War I. He was killed 5 days before the end of the war, which just is tragic in and of itself. So nearly all of his work was published posthumously. But I think that the fact that he was there, he volunteered for service, he served as an officer, he was injured, suffered what they called then shell shock, which we know now is post-traumatic stress disorder, and PTSD, or is PTSD, moral injury, and so forth. And he had the opportunity to lay out for the rest of the war and convalesce. But he volunteered to go back and lead troops again. And that's when sadly he was killed. But most of his poems are really rather dark, as you would expect from a poet writing from the trenches of World War I. But the one I read today, Futility, one of his more popular poems, because it doesn't have that, I don't want to say it lacks darkness, because it is a bit, but it lacks that that visceral pull of the depictions of the battlefield that most of his poems have, that make it almost uncomfortable to read, good to read, necessary to read, I think, lest we forget the horrors of war. But they can be uncomfortable to read. And in this poem for today, well, I'll get into it in just a second. But I think it's a great one for us to remember on Memorial Day, and to think about what it is that we are memorializing besides, pools opening and barbecues. So without further ado, this is Futility. Move him into the sun. Gently its touch awoke him once, at home, whispering of fields unsown. Always it woke him, even in France, until this morning and this snow. If anything might rouse him now, the kind old sun will know. Think how it wakes the seeds, woke once the clays of a cold star. Our limbs so dear achieved, our sides full nerves still warm, too hard to stir. Was it for this the clay grew tall? Oh, what made fatuous sunbeams toil to break earth's sleep at all? It's a rather sad depiction of a group of soldiers coming upon one of their unconscious fellows, attempting to move him into the sunlight, thinking that the sunlight will warm him and rouse him, when in fact he's dead. And it's their slow realization of the fact that their comrade, their friend, this person that they walked side by side with is now gone. And that kind of slow realization of their own mortality that also kind of imbues the scene when they come to that realization that this is the end for him, and very well could be the end for them at any time. The Bible talks a lot about war, and it talks a lot about how returning warriors go through a process of cleansing, and they're meant to stay outside the camp for 3 days and so on and so forth, so that they can properly recover from the toils of war. This is kind of what it's talking about. It's not necessarily the adrenaline rush of battle, although that's certainly a part of it. But when I did that video on the cleansing aspects of ritual, that's kind of part of it too. But this is what we need to remember on Memorial Day. Not only those who the sun no longer wakes, but those who were with those who have passed on. Those who were with those and survived. So as you're walking around, you see a soldier, a sailor, a marine, an airman, or so forth in uniform, by all means, continue the mantra, thank you for your service, right? But really take a second to think about what it is that not only they may have gone through, but what it is that they have committed to do. They have committed to put themselves in that very kind of situation where they may be trying to drag their best friend into the sun, knowing that they're gone forever. It's a deep and heavy thing. But I think it's important on this holiday that we have a little deepness and a little heaviness to go along with the barbecues. So, well, that is it for this time. I'm going back to my cold brew, my Revelation match. I hope you all have a lovely week, and as always, happy reading.